Here we are in July. We had a lovely sort of 10 days or so of lovely warm weather. It's really brought the plants on. But July is a month of change. It's a month of harvests. So we better give you our top tips for the month of July. Hello and welcome back to the No-Dig Norfolk Gardener. Now before I do anything, I just need to give a shout out to Pauline and Mark. I met them about a month ago in the Anchor Gardens Cafe in Great Yarmouth. They thought they recognised me, and they did. This is the No-Dig Norfolk Gardener. So I decided to say a hello to those. So I hope business is brisk for you, especially as we enter July now. And yeah, enjoy watching. Now, I said that July is a month of change. There's some change here, as you can see. Myself and Mrs. W have had the final harvest of peas. And I have some... Hello, Poppy. Hello. You decided to venture out, have you? And next to go in here are some beans. Climbing French beans and climbing runner beans. But for my first tip, I know that a lot of you have already started growing your runners and your French beans, and hopefully they're doing really well and have got nice and tall. Do remember when they do get to the top of the structures to pinch the tops out. Stop them growing any more upwards, but it will encourage them to make lateral shoots and therefore a larger harvest. Now, I mentioned at the top of the video that probably had about 10 days where temperatures have been 25, 26, 27 degrees Celsius. 30 it hit in here one day, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
It's quite warm for us. It is a bit of a summer. But as you can see today, it's not actually cold. It's still around 20 degrees, but we do have a bit of cloud in the air and obviously a bit of moisture that's falling. But if you are living in a part of the world at the moment, or indeed somewhere in the UK where you're not seeing this rain, you still have the warm temperatures, it's important that you prioritise watering. We could see those hot temperatures now during July. July tends to be one of the hottest months of the year for us here in the UK. And as less water seems to fall, your water butts get emptied that much quicker. So do prioritise your watering. And for me, it would be first and foremost anything that's in containers, because clearly they can't get the rain like the plots can. Secondly, I'd then prioritise anything that you're going to sow and anything that's freshly planted into your plots. You need them to establish as quickly as possible so that they can then look after themselves a bit more watering wise. And then it's things like what's coming to harvest. I would look to always ensure that celery has water, lettuce, and of course the courgette. And we just talked about the beans. Make sure they're getting water so those pods can swell up and become nice and juicy. July sees second early potato harvesting time. Now myself and Mrs. W have already harvested all of ours. They're in storage. And although these types of potato don't store in the same way that a main crop potato can, the remaining first earlies that we took out of here, they won't need to go in storage. We're eating them day by day.
Yeah, we are.
But a really good option to be able to store potatoes and enjoy them for some time is a variety Charlotte. You know we grow the variety Charlotte, and they will store. In fact, we've grown those before and stored them over winter, just like main crop potatoes, haven't we?
Yes, we have, yeah.
And they still retain that lovely taste and a long storage.
Just make sure, you just need to make sure that they're in a dark place, in a sack in a dark place, and sort of cool and dry, basically.
And you can see here, we've now planted out our leeks. So if your leeks aren't out yet, July is the month to do it. They could have been planted at any time between May and now. And really, with leeks, it's when you want them. Some people want nice baby leeks for September. For myself and Mrs. W, we don't even want to see a leek until November. There'll be much to harvest. Once these beans get going, we'll have lots of beans. There's lots of greens in the garden. So leeks are not the top of our list until November. That's when we want them. And that's why within our crop rotation, they always follow the first and second earlies. During July, make your final pickings of rhubarb and remove any flower stalks, cutting them down to the base. Rhubarb does need a period of time to recover, and so that you get some lovely harvests next year. If you haven't done so yet, ensure that your brassicas are netted. The white cabbage butterfly is not far away from entering your gardens or your allotment plot. That's if you haven't seen it already. We actually spotted our first one in the garden yesterday. Or more accurately, you did.
I did.
And they can reduce your brassicas to skeletons within a day. I may have told you this before, but one year myself and Mrs. W went away on holiday many years ago. We'd only just sort of really started gardening, so we're still quite green to it. Before we went away, we put our sprouts in, didn't we?
Yeah.
We came back, and honestly, there was just the stalks.
Yeah.
No leaf, no nothing.
We had actually put like bird netting over, thinking that was going to stop the...
Yeah.
Yeah, we were a bit naive then.
It's no good.
We've learnt a lot since then.
It needs to be mesh, and a fine mesh too, to stop them being able to lay their eggs on the leaves. Now, the brassicas here are doing quite well, and as you know, we've already had some calibres, but the cabbages are now coming ready now. Some nice hearts in there, Mrs. W. I'm just going to have a look at the collie to see what's going on in here.
Yes, I can just see it's forming in there, tightly packed still by those little leaves.
Yep, keep that in there.
That in there, yeah.
But if you remember, what I did say is that with your calibres, they will throw out extra heads. And this is exactly what these have done here. The only reason I haven't cleared these, because normally I would advocate getting rid of plants. You can see that these are becoming diseased. I'll need to remove these. And we don't want Mr. Slug to become involved with our plants. But as I'm still waiting for the rest of the row to harvest, I'm not ready actually to drop some plants in here. So we just left these, and it's a great example of how you can get another harvest.
Lovely, isn't it? Yeah, I like that.
And bearing in mind, we've already had a big head from all of these, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
We really have. I'll just check some. Oh, my days, Mrs. W. This has been hidden up, look.
Oh, crikey, I didn't know we had that there.
Right, this is what you can see. So if you don't harvest your broccoli when it's ready, this is what will happen to
That's
it.
a shame, isn't it? I think we can still eat that though. That's not, the flowers haven't opened, have they?
I'm sure you're going to make me eat it, Mrs. W.
Oh, I'm not going to force feed you.
You can see that we'll be able to come back here again shortly. Look, this is where all the little stems are coming. So
There's a lot on that one, isn't there?
Yeah, you do get a secondary harvest. This was the first one that we took the head from, though, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
That's why.
And the second row, they're coming along nicely, aren't they?
Yep, they're now getting their heads, aren't
hold
they?
that up so I can just show. That's our next lot of calibres getting ready for a harvest.
It's the beginning of the July
yes.
greens. Now, if you're lucky enough like us to be able to garden undercover as well as outside, then it's important that you do open the vents up on warm, sunny days. Doors open, vents open. Same with the polytunnel. And just let the ventilation come through. It'll help with any fungal or disease problems that you might get. Not least to let some of that hot air escape. Hopefully your tomatoes are starting to get like ours, but it's really easy to forget. But every time you walk in here, just have a look at your plants and keep pinching those side shoots out. In fact, if we look here, here's one that Mrs. W didn't take out.
Yeah, that's massive.
That's a big one.
It is.
They very quickly get like that. And all that will happen is that they'll just produce really small tomatoes and not some nice sized ones, because the plant is trying to look after too many stems.
I think you can. I think I'm right in saying you could put that into the soil and...
yeah, you could, yeah.
You could get another tomato plant from that.
You could. And if you look here, this side stem is even starting to side stem.
Yes. That is what they do best, tomatoes.
Now, in our experience, that's the best way to get a nice crop of tomatoes that will ripen for you so that you can eat. But I do know there are people out there that actually don't even bother to do the side shooting. It's not going to hurt the plant. But in our experience, the overall yield will be smaller. You'll get more tomatoes, clearly, but they will be much smaller. Now, of course, Mrs. W has been enjoying her sun gold, and it's the first year we've grown the sun gold, isn't it?
Yeah. And bizarrely, in here, this is the smallest plant we've got, and that's one that's had the first ripe tomato on it. So size isn't everything.
But one thing I would say about that tomato plant is that it's quite valuable for growing, because it's actually the first of the tomato plants to actually give up a harvest. Mm-hmm. The others are still some time behind. Although in the polytunnel we do have many tomatoes, don't we?
We do. I think this is going to be the year of the tomato.
But for my next tip, now that you've got flowers and you can see tomatoes on your plants, then do keep watering them regularly. Don't let them go without water for long periods, otherwise you'll find yourself with splitting fruits. But also, because the fruits are starting to come, it's a good idea to give them a weekly feed. You can use any proprietary feed, like a tomato feed. We don't do that, we actually make our own comfrey feed. And if you search our playlists on our channel, we do have a video dedicated to how to make comfrey feed. It's cheap. It also helps immensely, comfrey, with bringing pollinators into your garden. Believe you me, you will see so many bees and hoverflies and all sorts of insects buzzing around those plants.
Those flowers, they love them, don't they?
Absolutely.
And they're an early flowering plant as well, so when the bees need extra, Yeah.
So it's worth investing in a comfrey plant. I know somebody did ask me, I think it was Mark, who asked me about where we got ours from. We actually got ours from our neighbour, didn't we?
Yeah.
But you can buy them from garden centres. You can order them online. They're readily available. Just make sure you put it somewhere, not in your plots, but away from it, because they do multiply.
They do.
Quite vigorously. Ours is in Mrs. W's stumpery. It's fine there, it's contained, it's not getting anywhere else. Having said that, must have been the birds, but we have another one that's growing over there, don't we?
Different
A
variety.
completely different variety.
It's got a white flower on it, yeah.
And we haven't bought it in
No.
here.
Thanks to the birds.
As I said at the top of the video, July is a month for harvest. There are great harvests to be had, but with those final harvests comes material that you can compost. As soon as myself and Mrs. W had pulled up the peas, they went straight into the composter. So, for my next tip, do keep composting. We have lots in the bays. It's starting to build up nicely.
Yes.
Ready for this coming November. During the month of July, watch out for when 2/3 of your onion tops are falling over. And then you can begin harvesting. You don't need to wait until the tops are yellow. The bulbs should be changing colour by now. Just put them in a crate without being crowded so that air can circulate, and put it somewhere under cover. You can see with our garlic here that we've put them under the roof of our composter. This will allow them to dry, and it's important for storage. Done this way, they should keep until next spring. After a month, store them in your preferred method. Now, I think it was Claire, Mrs. W, that had a comment if we had any tips on how to cure alliums and so that they can store. So we just talked about the onions. We haven't harvested our onions yet. They're not ready for their harvest, but the garlic certainly was. And you can see, it doesn't matter whether it's garlic, onions, this is the way that you cure them. And since their harvest, you can already see that the leaves are starting to brown off. They've been here about a week, haven't they?
Yes.
And over the next 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes 4 depending on the weather, all of these will turn brown. And then what we can do is we can then cut these down to where we want them. Some people like to plait them, so you need to leave quite a bit of stem to be able to do that. We don't. We shall just cut the necks down to here, cut the majority of root off. They'll all go into this crate and into our shed for storage.
Yeah.
You can see it's exactly the same for the elephant garlic. And I can already feel that the stems are starting to break down. The idea is really you want to get as much of the moisture out of the neck. In fact, you want all of the moisture out of the neck. Because if you don't, once it goes in storage, that moisture can seep back into the bulb. And then that's what causes rotting and infections. And if you don't spot one, it can actually spread to all of your harvest. So the other thing is make sure you do keep checking them once they do go into storage. Periodically, just go in there, have a look, see if there are any that are going over, not so good, and if they are, remove them. July heralds the start of quite a long, soft fruiting harvesting season. We've already been enjoying strawberries for some weeks from the polytunnel, still enjoying the ones from outside. Had a huge harvest the other week, didn't we?
We did.
And there's another one to come at least. You can see the raspberries are now ready.
We definitely need to get out here and pick some of these. There's lots of them, isn't there?
You'll also be harvesting gooseberries, black currants, red currants, white currants. And what that means for us, and hopefully yourselves, it begins the season of preserving. Mrs. W shall be preserving all month long. It's one of her busiest times of the year, actually, and that's so that we can enjoy all this lovely taste all through the year. Because after the blackberries finish, that's it. There's no more soft fruit until the following year. But we do love to eat and enjoy all of this lovely food all through the year. So do look out for those videos. If you're not quite sure on how you can go about preserving these in the different ways, and you haven't subscribed to our channel already, don't forget to do so. And then you'll be notified whenever we upload a video, whether it's out here in the garden or Mrs. W giving you tips to make the most of your harvests. As we've been saying, July is a month of change. There'll be new plantings that are going in as we take our final harvest. Do make sure you've got plants ready to go in. We have the beans that are ready to go and replace these peas in the arch. We have new greens to go in as the onions begin their harvest. The more you can have ready, the easier it will be for you. And for us, we want to be able to eat as much of our own fresh food for as much of the year as we can. We're not quite there yet. We're getting there. In fact, if we can just crack the whole potato thing, and we are working on that at the moment.
We'd be pretty vegetable self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient,
wouldn't we?
exactly,
Yes,
Mrs. W. But, just as a word of caution, as you walk about your plot, your allotment, your garden, whatever it may be, do always take the time to look at your vegetables. There's no telling what might be going on behind your back. It could be that those cabbage whites have penetrated your defences. And like we said earlier, it's absolutely devastating if you come out here in a couple of days' time and all of those plants are no longer growing because they've eaten everything. Or, if you do manage to save it, it's got horrible black stuff all over it, hasn't it? Makes the cauliflower look awful.
Yes.
But just by keeping a check the undersides of leaves as well as the tops. If you see the familiar signs of those little yellow eggs, just rub them between your thumb and forefinger. done with. And of course, it goes without saying, if you actually find caterpillars on there, do ensure you pick those caterpillars off. It's also the season when blight can strike. You know from earlier, we got early blight. And what we actually did was to cut all the haulms down so that the tubers didn't become affected. And we got an amazing harvest, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
We really did.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of potatoes that will see us through, certainly through over the next few months, that we can eat before we look at some of the other potatoes that we've been experimenting with. Mustn't say too much about that, Mrs. W. That's for later on in the year, isn't it?
It is.
Do have a great gardening week, won't you all? We shall see you on the next one.